here from Backroad Buddies, and the video we want to share with you today is about the 10 essentials. Now this is the first of 3 videos, and this covers just the 10 essentials. The second video will cover additional hiking gear, and the third video will contain additional gear we take when we do overnight backpacking trips. Now if you've been around hiking or scouting or something like that, you've probably heard of the hiking 10 essentials, or the 10 essentials of hiking. And sometimes it can be a little confusing because it seems like everybody has their own list of what the 10 essentials are. So hopefully in this video we're going to kind of demystify what they are and why, and help you come up with your own 10 essentials. Now first, just a little disclaimer. We've done a lot of hiking, a few backpacking trips, but by no means are we hiking experts, outdoor survival experts, nor medical personnel. So take what we say with a grain of salt and do your own research, but we are just sharing what we do, so hopefully it'll be helpful for you. Now the 10 essentials have been around since 1974. Let me get the right information here so I don't goof it up. So they first appeared in the 3rd edition of Mountaineering, The Freedom of the Hills in 1974, which is a publication by the Mountaineers. They've kind of updated that list a little bit as technology's changed a little bit. So what they currently list as the 10 essentials, and these are just the broad categories here. 1 is navigation, 2 is headlamp, 3 is sun protection, 4 is first aid, 5 is knife, 6 is fire, 7 is shelter, 8 is extra food, 9 is extra water, and 10 is extra clothes. Now, the Mountaineers designed the 10 essentials to kind of answer or address 2 basic questions while you're on trail. The first one is, can you prevent emergencies and deal with the ones that occur? So that was question 1. Question 2 is, can you survive the night out on the trail? And so they say the first 5 10 essentials really address the emergency situation, and the second 5 deal with trying to survive the night. Now you may be saying, well, I'm just going on a day hike. I'm not planning on being there overnight. Well, accidents happen. You could get lost, you can get injured, and you may find yourself on trail overnight. So that's really kind of what the 10 essentials are there for, that you have all the gear you need to be able to survive, because no one plans on getting lost and no one plans on getting hurt, but things happen. And when you're on a trail, help isn't always immediately available, so you kind of have to help yourself, and that's what the 10 essentials are there for. So let's dive into what each of those really mean. But before we do that, if you are just interested in a couple areas or a couple items, you can look in the description and there's a timeline, so you can jump right to a particular item, right to a particular area that you're interested in, instead of going through the whole video if you so choose. Essential item 1 is navigation. Now, this isn't just one item for us. We kind of use several different methods. So the main one we rely on is our iPhones. We both carry our iPhones, and we usually track our hikes and use an app called All Trails, which usually has a lot of trails around, but sometimes not every hike is in there. There's also another app called Hiking Project, which isn't quite as extensive as All Trails, that Keith likes to use. Anyway, you can usually get, at least even if I don't have the trail in All Trails will bring up a map of the area. I have the paid version of the app, so I'm able to download maps for offline use, and it'll track where I am using GPS, so I can see a dot on the map exactly where we are. So if we're getting off trail or or going off in a wrong direction, it's easy to see in the app. In addition, we also each carry a Garmin inReach. Now, these are satellite communicators, and their main purpose for us anyway is the SOS function. So if we really get into trouble, we get lost, or we get hurt and we can't get ourselves back out, we have an SOS button that we can signal for local rescue authorities. And because these are satellite communication, we can actually do a two-way communication with those emergency services. So it's not just, you know, a beacon that says, hey, we need help, but we can actually communicate so they can figure out, you know, what kind of team to send, if they need to haul us out, if they need to fly us out, or, you know, just help us through a situation and be able to help ourselves. So these are great little communicators. We use them actually quite a bit. Now, originally we were only carrying one of them, but then we got to thinking, you know, what if one of us falls over the cliff and is laying there unconscious on a ledge, and they're the ones that have the Garmin, right? Then what does the other person do? So we actually switched to, we each carry one, so in case we get separated or for whatever reason, we both have emergency contact. Now, this also does track our GPS locations, so you can use it to kind of map out where you've been, so you can use it to kind of breadcrumb your way back to the trailhead. So in a sense, it is a navigation. I think we don't normally really use it as navigation, but it's more of a safety device for us and emergency. We also use it, it is a paid service. So there is a monthly, there's an annual fee, and then when you have it activated, there's a monthly fee, but you don't have to have it activated the whole year. So we only have it activated when we're on the road, or we happen to want to go for a remote hike. But it's also great we can send text messages via satellite. So it's kind of another little safety feature. So when we start a hike, we send a text message to both of our kids saying we're starting a hike. And then usually about halfway through, we'll send a, hey, everything's okay. And then when we're done with the hike, we say, hey, we're done and off trail. And each of those text messages sends our GPS location. So if something would happen to us and they don't hear from us, hey, they started this hike, they haven't checked in, they can, first of all, try to contact us in case we just forgot to send an ending message. And then they can contact the authorities and let them know what our last known GPS location was to help a search and rescue find us. So it's sort of navigation, but a little more safety. And then in addition, and this kind of combines several things. Well, if we actually still do carry a old-fashioned compass. Most people don't anymore. And then if there is a trail map, you know, at a park or something, we will pick up and carry a paper map just as a backup, because both of the, the iPhone and the Garmin run on batteries. So what happens when the batteries die, right? Usually try to make sure these are charged. Garmin batteries last for days, so usually that's not an issue on a day hike unless you're really stuck out there for days at a time. And we try to, turn off things on our phones so these batteries last for a while we're on trail. You can also carry a little battery bank to recharge your phones as you go. But yes, we still do carry a compass as a backup. So if, our batteries fail, at least we can still get our bearings even without a map, so we're not, going around in circles. We kind of know our headings and our bearings. And that's just being familiar with the area that you're hiking into. Make sure you look at an overall map, kind of have an idea of where you are and what's around you. That's just, it's common sense, but we don't always do that. You know, we think, oh, I got this little trail on my phone, and then, you know, the trail seems to disappear, or you make a wrong turn, you aren't checking your maps, and now you kind of lost your bearings and you have no idea where you are. So those are all kind of tied together, even though, you know, the initial thing is navigation. You don't really want to get lost, but if you do, how do you signal for help? Essential item 2 is headlamp. Now, I was actually surprised that the mountaineers list headlamp as opposed to something a little more generic like a light, because, I mean, a headlamp is a good source of light, but then, you know, a flashlight will also provide you light. So this is when you're, I mean, mostly for at night when it gets dark, that you can kind of see, you know, what's around you. You may be setting up an emergency shelter in the dark, or, you know, you hear some noises and you kind of want to know what they are out there. Or you're just trying to signal a rescue team that's trying to find you, you know, with a light. So, I mean, a flashlight would serve that same purpose, although not as well. The same thing could be said on our iPhones. We all have that, you know, little flashlight function on most phones these days. But for one, you use that flashlight on your phone, it will drain your batteries pretty quickly. And if you're relying on your phone for navigation, that's not really something you want to do. So you want to have something in addition to your phone for a light. A flashlight, as I said, would work, but then you've either got one hand tied up holding the flashlight, or you got it laying on the ground and it rolls around and away while you're trying to, you know, see what, you know, use your hands to do whatever you're trying to do at night. And that's where a headlamp really, really shines. For one, they are really bright, very bright light. And, you know, you wear them on your head and you can kind of angle them to where you need the light, and then both hands are free to do whatever you're trying to do, or get a splinter out of your hand, or whatever. In addition, oops, let's see if I can get it to switch here. Most headlamps have a red light. Now, a red light at night won't hurt your night vision, so you'll still have good night vision with a red light on, whereas if you turn the white light on and then you're looking where the light isn't, you know, you've lost your night vision because your, you know, eyes have adjusted to more of a daylight situation. So the red light is really nice to have to preserve that night vision, plus it doesn't disturb wildlife around you. Not that that's your priority in an emergency situation, but it's just nice to know. So we recommend headlamps as well, and we each carry one. Essential item 3 is sun protection. Now, most people, when they think of sun protection, they think sunscreen. And we do use sunscreen, but sun protection is a lot more than just sunscreen. Now, we're outside a lot, so we try to minimize the amount of sunblock we use. And actually, it's more effective than sunblock is clothing. So normally when we hike, we're wearing long sleeves, long pants. Now they can be thin, and it can be really hot out, but we'll normally have long sleeves and long pants on. That serves as sun protection, which means a lot less sunblock you have to use. But it also protects you from rubbing up against twigs or plants that may be poisonous, like poison ivy, or getting scratched up, or, you know, cactus or something. So it serves more than one purpose. And we find that even the long sleeves and long pants doesn't really add too much to being overheated in the heat, because especially once it gets a little damp from your sweat and it's loose, light clothing, keeping that direct sun off your skin actually sometimes feels cooler than if you were had bare skin exposed to the sun. So in addition, don't forget your lips. with chapstick. And then we usually wear, oh, that's Keith's, but usually wear these wide brim hats to shade our faces, necks, and ears. But we'll still put sunblock on our face, in ears and neck, and the backs of our hands. Which brings up another point. We don't, but some people do wear what's called hiking gloves. They're kind of fingerless, but they really protect the backs of your hands from the sun, especially if you use trekking poles, because your hands are up facing the sun more than if they're down by your side. Probably bike gloves would work the same if you don't want to buy something else. And I'm actually thinking about starting to do that, because I do use trekking poles a lot, and reduce how much sunblock I have to put on my skin almost every day. And then last but not least, your eyes. I always am wearing sunglasses on the trail. It's very rarely that I'll take them off unless it's really, dark woods or something. Not only do these protect my eyes from the sun, but it also protects it from the wind, from sand, from, a branch snapping back in my face, keep it out of my eyes, eye protection. So yeah, that's kind of a key thing. Now, normally we'll put sunblock on and chapstick, if we remember. Chapstick's the one we always seem to forget for some reason. We put it on before we leave on the hike, but then we also make sure we carry sunblock and chapstick with us in our packs, because especially if you're out there longer than you anticipate, that you need to reapply some of that stuff because it wears off after a while. Essential number 4 is first aid. So we normally just carry, you can pick up these little first aid kits that are intended for day hiking. This one says day hike kit, 2 people, 1 day. Just basic little kits all put together for you. But yeah, they are pretty basic, but you want to be able to handle a lot of things that come up. So, just a variety of Band-Aids and gauze and tape and little scissors and antibiotic ointment, little antiseptic wipes to clean out a wound, some basic medications like pain, so acetaminophen and ibuprofen. Might want some anti-diarrheal medicine on you, because that won't be any fun if you're on the trail with that. Maybe a little pair of tweezers so you can get splinters out. Oh, and the other thing, which normally isn't in a typical first aid kit, is a tick remover. So this is what the tick remover looks like, and it's really pretty simple to use. You just kind of, well, anyway, there's instructions, read them. We've used it, I think, only once when a tick actually attached to our skin, but I carry this on the outside of my pack, so it's nice and handy. And that's just we'd gone for years and never seen ticks, and then we had 4 ticks on us within like a few days, and we're like, okay, we need something with us to get those before they latch in, because ticks can carry all kinds of diseases, and you really don't want that. So being able to get them off as quickly as possible is kind of the key. So I think Keith carries one on his keychain, and we have a couple around the RV. So we have several of these nice and handy. And that just kind of leads into another thing too. When you get done with the hike, you need to regularly check your body for ticks, because they seem to show up later, not necessarily while you're on the hike. Essential item 5 is a knife. Now, I was kind of surprised the mountaineers just say knife, because when you read the description, it's a little bit more than a knife. It also includes extra gear to be able to repair gear that might fail on you on the trail. You know, strap breaks, you know, you get a rip in your jacket. So usually includes items like rope or cord, some strong tape. Now we take, this is duct tape, and we don't take like a big roll of duct tape, so we just kind of wrap the duct tape around something. In this case is just kind of a Sharpie here. And then a knife. So it's important to at least just have a basic blade. I carry just a simple little Swiss Army knife. I probably need to clean it, but the blade I mainly use is just the main blade. It does have a couple other little blades in there. Little screwdriver, I think. Can opener, but I don't normally use anything but the main blade. And then Keith actually carries a small Leatherman multi-tool, which has all kinds of things. It has a main blade, it has you know, screwdriver, tweezers, lots of gadgets. Have we used a lot of it? No. But, you know, we haven't been in an emergency situation out on trail either. So the knives are mainly to help repair things or try to rig something up. You know, you may want to cut some cord to rig up some kind of shelter, or, you know, as I was talking before, maybe to figure out kind of tying a splint on, or, you know, cut up some wood to build a fire. So just having some kind of blade, knife blade with you is essential. Essential item 6 is fire. Now we, again, don't carry just one thing. We have backups. So, I mean, the simple thing to have a fire is just a simple little Bic lighter. Make sure it works. Make sure that it has fluid in it, or carry a backup. But sometimes these fail, or, you know, it may get smashed, or, you know, up against a rock or something. So we like having backups, especially something this essential, because a fire could be the difference between life and death overnight, or at least frostbite. So, and it can also be used to signal for a rescue team to find you. So being able to build a fire is pretty essential. Now, there's also these little, I think they call them fire sticks or something. It's just really kind of a compressed little wood that, you know, kind of as kindling or whatever to get a fire started, but you need to light it with something. And then, so we have the little butane lighter. We also carry wood matches. We would not recommend carrying, you know, like those little cardboard matchbooks, because they're a little flimsy, not very reliable, and hard to get going. What you want is kind of a wooden matchstick that strike anywhere. This actually container has a striker on it, but you want it to be kept in some kind of closed container that keeps them dry, because wet matches don't do you any good. And then, kind of as a third option, in case both of those fail on us, we carry, this is called a magnesium fire starter. You could do like a flint and steel, or I'm not really familiar. I've actually never used this. I don't know if Keith has, but the way it works is, this is made out of magnesium, so you take a knife or whatever and you just kind of shave off a couple shavings, and then the striker side, you can create a spark, and that magnesium ignites very, very easily. There are options that have a little metal, you know, scraper and striker, but we have our pocket knife, our knives with us, so we don't really need an extra thing on our fire starter tool. So those are what we carry to make sure we can start a fire. Essential item 7 is shelter. Now, a shelter doesn't have to be a backpacking tent. This is an emergency shelter. you're not interested, well, maybe you are, but most people don't want to carry that kind of weight in exchange for comfort overnight in just an emergency situation where they aren't really planning on spending the night. So most people will not carry a backpacking tent on a day hike. However, there are other options that are much smaller and lighter, which may make a difference in surviving the night. One is called an emergency bivvy, and this is a, see, it's real small, it's light, it's basically a bag, if you want to think of it that way. And I'll show a picture here of what it looks like unrolled because it's not easy to get it rolled back up. But it's a real kind of, I think it's polypropylene. It's kind of a stretchy material, so it's tear resistant. And on the inside it's reflective, so it's kind of like if you've heard of emergency space blankets. I don't think they normally recommend those emergency space blankets anymore because they're just, they tear too easy, and they're really just a blanket, where this is kind of like it's a bag, like a sleeping bag. So you would crawl inside it. It's supposed to retain about 90% or reflect about 90% of your body heat back inwards. So it'll keep you warm. It's also waterproof and windproof. So it really is a single person self-contained little shelter. It doesn't like go over your head, but you crawl inside of it basically. Now you could, if you're on a budget, just use a large garbage bag, either to crawl inside or, you know, kind of wrap around you or whatever, or a space blanket. But then if you're going to spend the money on a space blanket, I would recommend an emergency bivvy instead. However, I carry this. Keith actually carries this big tarp. Now, notice this is a lot bigger than the bivvy, and it's a lot thicker. It does have the reflective material on one side, but we use this for more than just an emergency shelter. Now this one, I mean, it does have eyelets, so you could kind of rig up some kind of almost tent-like structure, or just wrap it around you. We do carry tape on us, so he could, in an emergency, probably create kind of a little bivvy stack out of it to protect him. But we actually use this a lot as a sit pad when we're on a hike and the ground's dirty or wet or whatever, and so it's a little bit of padding. You can put it on the ground and sit on it. When we were on a backpacking trip, we actually spread it out and laid on it in the afternoon. So it's got multiple purposes than just emergency shelter, but this will also do. And like I said before, it could be as simple as a large, you know, lawn and garden bag or something. Just something that protects you from cold, wind, and moisture or rain, because that'll make the difference of dying of exposure overnight or making it through the night. Now, you probably won't be comfortable, but you will survive. Oh, and I almost forgot. Another purpose or function of these emergency shelters, if you notice, it's this bright orange, and it has reflective material. So if you are trying to get a rescue party to find you and they're flying overhead, having something bright colored that you can wave around or reflective that you can wave around will help the people up in aircraft be able to see you on the ground. Essential item 8 is extra food. Now, normally when we go on a hike, depending how long it is, we'll take several granola bars. I like to take an apple. So we take a Ziploc bag to put all our garbage, apple cores in, to carry it back out. Pack it in, pack it out, right? Sometimes we'll take nuts or some other little power bar or something. And we'll usually take extra than what we think we need for the hike. So it usually means like an extra granola bar or two. Food probably isn't quite as critical as some of the other essential items, but if you're well nourished, you're going to think better. You're going to have more calories to burn to help keep your body warm. So it is a pretty essential thing to have food on you when you're on a hike, and especially if you get caught out on trail overnight. So you kind of need those calories. Essential item 9 is extra water. Now I kind of consider water more important than food. You can go a couple days without food and survive, although you might survive a little better with food, but water you cannot. You can die of dehydration in a matter of hours. So having enough water with you is very essential. The problem is water is heavy. So you generally don't want to take too much water with you, but it can be life or death. So that's one item where you do not want to skimp on. Generally on a good length hike, we're taking about 2 liters of water per person. If it's a shorter hike, we may be able to get by with 1. But again, that's only if we're not too far from help or sources of water. You know, we're trails close to a road, or it's close to, you know, we know there's sources of water along the way or something. We'll take the risk and take less. But there are occasions where we'll even take a lot more, especially if it's hot, high elevation, it's a really long hike. There was one hike that we went on where a couple of them actually, that we took 4 liters of water with us, and it almost wasn't enough just for the hike, let alone if we got stuck out there. So you need to be careful. Kind of along those lines, you know, especially if you're backpacking, carrying all your water with you may not really be a realistic option. So there are other ways to get around that. One is know where your water sources are. On some hikes, there may or may not be water sources. But if there are, you can do things like treat your water. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can filter the water. So we normally carry a Sawyer. This is a mini squeeze. The one before this we had was a micro squeeze, which is smaller. I kind of like that better, but this is what we have right now. There are a couple things you need to be aware of with these type of filters. I think they're ceramic or something. They cannot be frozen. So that's why we don't have our micro squeeze Sawyer filters anymore, because we did not store them properly, and apparently they got frozen, and then we tried to use it and it wouldn't work. So make sure your filter works if you're relying on it. So check out the trail ahead of time, know what the current conditions are, check with, you know, some kind of authority, National Forest or whoever, or Park Service or something, to know where your water sources are along the trail if you're going to rely on them. So the way these filters work is the mini squeeze actually came with this, they say it's what, 16-ounce bag where you put the dirty water in here, you screw the filter on, and then that's why it's called a Sawyer squeeze, you squeeze the water through the filter into a water bottle. The micro squeeze also had a bag, and I don't know what was different about that bag. And I actually used that bag, but the one that came with the mini this time, this was like useless. I couldn't get the water into it to really any kind of efficiency. You know, it was like a couple swallows of water in there to filter at a time. Wasn't, you know, gonna work. The other option is like these smart water bottles are the right size for these filters to screw on. And if you notice, this one says clean. So Keith, luckily, on our backpacking trip, was carrying 2 of these. So one he would fill up with dirty water, put the thing on, and then he could squeeze it into the clean water bottle. Or I could squeeze it into my water bottles that I was carrying because I was going to depend on that bag, and that was totally worthless. So keep that in mind. So test these things out before you hit the trail. Yeah, so, and sometimes he'll just put this on the dirty water bottle and just drink right out of the filter. It's almost like a little spouter. So you can drink right out of the filter if you want to. But I typically squeeze it into another bottle. So that's an option. But again, you have to have a water source for that to work. The other option is some kind of water purification tablets. Make sure these are for the appropriate size of your water bottles, because I think I've looked at some of them and they're like, oh, the one tablet's for 4 gallons of water. Well, that doesn't work when you've got little 1-liter bottles you want to purify. And also look at how long it takes for the tablet to take effect. We kind of ran into an issue when we were in Banff. We were hiking up to, I forgot what hike we were, oh, Sentinel Pass in the Lake Louise area. And we weren't relying on our water filter, but that's when we discovered that our micro squeeze didn't work. We have like, well, we're getting low. We were out on trail a little longer than we expected, and we were at a water source. So we're like, well, let's fill up one of our bottles just to make sure. And the squeeze didn't work. And then we're like, well, we've got these water purification tablets on us. So we plopped one of those in the water, and then we're reading the directions. It's like, well, you're supposed to let it sit for 4 hours. What, 4 hours? We were hoping to be off trail by then. And we were, and we made it without needing that water. But there are other ones that only take like 30 minutes, I think, to activate. So be aware of that. But again, this only works if you have a water source. The other thing to keep in mind with water is your electrolyte balance. I discovered this the hard way. It was one of those hikes where we were taking 4 liters of water with us, which we needed. It was in the upper 90s. We were doing an 8-mile hike with like a 3,000-foot elevation gain. So a strenuous hike in heat, well, I don't know if you call that extreme heat, but it was hot, right? And so it was one of those where we were climbing up to a peak, so it was uphill all the way up and luckily downhill on the way back. And I had gone through 2 liters of water already right as we were approaching the peak. And I was starting not to feel well. Keith had already switched to a sports drink like Gatorade, and plus he was eating a little more than I was. And that's the thing with your electrolytes. Well, there's 2 ways you can get out of balance. One is you're not drinking enough water and you're getting dehydrated, which wasn't the case here. We were drinking plenty of water. We were stopping every 15 minutes, making sure we were taking a drink, because we knew the conditions were extreme in this case. And then when I started feeling bad, I switched to Gatorade as well, but I think it was a little too late. And I was just not feeling well. I was kind of lightheaded. I was stopping every 10 steps to catch my breath. And I'm like, this isn't right. So I crawled under a bush for, I don't know how many minutes, 10 minutes or so, had something to eat, had some more, and I actually was doing sports drink at that time, which have electrolytes in them. The other option is a sport hydration tablet that you can add to your water bottle that'll give you electrolytes as well. Because the issue when you drink a lot of water, like we were there because of the heat, that you can actually get overhydrated, or what's called, I forget what it's called, water intoxication or something. And it gets your electrolytes out of balance when you drink that much water without also consuming electrolytes, which could be in your food. So if you're eating food, that helps. If you're doing sports drink, that helps. Or just adding electrolytes to your water. And so we were so close to the peak, but luckily I listened to my body. There was no way I was going to keep going. So we had to turn around. We were so close to reaching the peak, but it was not to be that day. And once I started going downhill, I started feeling better because I wasn't exerting myself as much. It could have been also a combination of elevation sickness as well, because we were getting above 8,000 feet on elevation, which is about where you start getting elevation sickness. And we hadn't been at elevation for several months. We live at elevation, but you know, your body loses that, you know, over just a matter of weeks. So it could have been that, it could have been the electrolyte imbalance, or a combination of the two. Don't really know, but I know I did not feel well. In fact, it took me about 24 hours to feel right again. But coming back down elevation, not exerting myself, we were going downhill. And we went through all 4 liters of our water each, well, and sports drinks as well, by the time we got back down. But so it's not, it's serious stuff. You need to pay attention to it, because it was actually later on that month a couple people had died in Big Bend from dehydration. So water and electrolytes, very important. Essential item 10, the last one, is extra clothing. This is another one where it's variable depending on the hike, depending on the weather. But you want to make sure you have extra layers with you, and that includes protection from the rain. So we almost always carry a rain jacket and rain pants, even if it's not predicted to have any rain in the next couple days. Not only does this protect you against rain and moisture, but it also protects you against the wind, and it'll help keep you warm by blocking that wind. So these are almost always in our packs. And then the rest is kind of depending on what the weather is and how long of a hike it is. Keep in mind, when you're hiking, your blood's moving, so you need a lot fewer layers and a lot less warmth than once you sit down and or sit still. So you may be hiking in shorts and a t-shirt. Hopefully it's a synthetic, but that's the other thing. You want to have synthetic clothing, not cotton. So I would not wear this t-shirt hiking, because when cotton gets wet, it no longer will keep you warm. So, and it may not be from rain, it may be just from sweat. And that's another kind of key item, is you want to have layers. So as you're hiking and you warm up, take those layers off so you don't work up too much of a sweat. You want to keep a lot of those clothes dry. And then as you get cold, start layering it back on. Now again, you may not have very many layers on while you're hiking, but you get injured, you get stuck out overnight. When you're sitting still on the cold ground and it's pulling that body heat away from you, you're going to need a lot more layers than when you were actually hiking. So take more layers than you think you're going to need. So varying, thicknesses. I have, kind of these pullover kind of base layers. I have a thicker one. And then things like, gloves, and I kind of like headbands as opposed to hats, but keep those in mind to have those for warmth. A dry pair of socks, because your feet will get sweaty, and if you're stuck overnight, switching into dry socks may mean the difference between getting frostbite or not. So that's usually a good idea to have with you as well. Kind of along those same lines, this isn't really clothing, but I've come close to getting frostbite on my toes a couple of times. So now my toes probably have some good damage, not good damage, bad damage. And they're very sensitive to the cold. So if it is any remote possibility of it being cold out overnight on a hiking day, I try to always carry foot warmers with me. And in fact, now when we go hiking in the snow or go snowshoeing, I'll just go ahead and put a pair of these in my boots starting off with, just to keep those toes warm, because it's a lot easier to keep them warm than to try to warm them up once they've gone numb. So this isn't really clothing, but it kind of follows that same idea of keeping you warm. Oh, I almost forgot, kind of one of our favorite layers is a puffy coat. These are really warm, so they act like a winter coat. They squish up really small, so they're nice to throw in a pack to have a really warm layer with you. We prefer the synthetic fill ones. You can also get them in down, but I think if you get down wet, it doesn't keep you as warm, where that's not true on a synthetic fill. So we actually went with a synthetic fill for our puffy coats. They're not cheap, but they really save a lot of space if you really need a nice warm layer in your pack. Thanks for watching. If you want more details, look in the description below for a link to our related blog posts, so check that out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Ta-ta for now.